I have always sought out friendships with people that are not in my age group. And some of the coolest people I know, like your parents, are much older than me, and they have the best stories.
Hi, I'm Carol Podell, and this is She Takes the Lead. Hi, party people. It's Carol. Today, I have a really cool guest. Her name is Aubrey Hubbell. She is actually my neighbor, as well as a friend and a family friend. She has a really interesting story. She's a businesswoman. She's an artist. She's kind of a Renaissance woman. She's a mom. She's the co-founder and chief design officer of a company brand called Hazel, which is a luxe, innovative femcare brand for the, quote, ever-evolving women. So what's interesting is that Hazel is a new perspective on the disposable brief for leaks, for incontinence, for the woman of my vintage, younger as well. These are women who've had babies or have a little leakage, and they have created a brief that is like a little panty that you can literally wear under leggings and it doesn't show. It's totally comfortable, totally great. It doesn't show. And after we recorded this episode, I got really, really sick, like a bad cough. And it didn't go away for 3 weeks, I think. And I just kept coughing and I kept, peeing on myself a little bit. And it was not only frustrating, it was embarrassing. I was well enough to go outside and go out, but not really well enough to not be coughing. And I couldn't help it. There was nothing I could do. And, I had tried on Aubrey's products, Hazel's products. Hazel is the company. I tried on the briefs before we started the episode, but I actually didn't need them. And then I needed them and they were amazing. I had on a pair of Spanx leggings when I went to the doctor to figure out how to really fix it. And you couldn't see it. You couldn't see through it. It was amazing. And it didn't feel bulky. And the material is great. And it's completely disposable. So I'm looking forward to having this great chat with Aubrey because her own trajectory has been very interesting. And she's now done quite a bit. But her work with Hazel's been pretty amazing. But now I'm even looking at the episode from a different perspective as a listener. So I'm going to introduce her and then you'll get to hear wonderful Aubrey talk about all the things she's done and all the things she's doing and her perspective on age and aging and parenting and being a businesswoman in this market. So prior to Hazel, Aubrey was the first production designer at wedding planning and registry platform Zola, where she designed digital experiences supporting couples from engagement through newlywed life. And before that, Aubrey was the first digital designer on both the brand and product teams, and part of the founding team that launched Rockets of Awesome, which is a DTC kids fashion brand. I don't know if you've seen Rockets of Awesome. I remember seeing there was a pop-up store in Bloomingdale's, which is the first time I discovered Rockets of Awesome. And I didn't actually have kids when I saw it. I didn't have my little girl when I saw it. I was trying to have her. And I remember thinking, oh my God, these are the most amazing items for kids, the clothes for kids. It made me even more excited to keep trying to have her. Anyway, Aubrey held the same role at the founder's prior startup Cricket Circle, which was a personalized baby registry and editorial resource for pregnant women and new moms. She has a BFA in digital design from the University of Colorado in Denver and studied Scandinavian design in Copenhagen, Denmark. And if you've ever been to her apartment, you can see how that has influenced her aesthetic eye. And actually, if you look at the box and if you look at Hazel and the brand, you can really see how that Scandinavian design has really influenced the brief itself. Aubrey is passionate about building brands and products that solve pain points for women in specific life stages, from marriage to motherhood to menopause and beyond. She has a wonderful perspective on the process of living your life, on aging, and on what each age group can really give to you. That she's a great example of understanding how profound it is to have relationships with people of different ages. So without further ado, here is my interview with the lovely Aubrey Hubbell. Hi, Aubrey. How are you?
Hi, Carol. I'm doing well. How are you?
Excellent. Excellent. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. I'm excited to talk too. This is going to be a really cool conversation.
It will be. I always love a good chat with you. So
thank you.
This is just special.
Samesies. I'm going to just start because we have a really interesting way of how we met. We've known each other for a while. We are neighbors, which I love. But the thing that I find hilarious, and we are different generations. I'm a bit older, but we are certainly more contemporaries than how we met, which is you and your husband, Matt, befriended my parents, who, just for like the record, my father is turning 88 next week and my mother is 85.
It's true.
Yes. And I just think it was amazing because I had no idea. You guys at the time lived down the street and I knew you, sort of your faces and like, hi, but I had no idea. We weren't really friends. And as I said, we're more contemporaries. And then as I was talking to my parents, they were like, oh, we met this really nice couple, Aubrey and Matt. And honestly, I was thinking like, oh, cool. They're like a nice older couple. Like, they're contemporaries. Or even if they were younger, they probably said they're younger. I probably thought like 60s or maybe 50s, but certainly not. What are you, a millennial or Gen Z?
Millennial. Yeah. I'm in my 30s.
You're in your 30s. Yeah. Like a millennial is now what conjured in my mind when they said that.
Yep.
And you guys continued to be friends and go out to have dinner and like hang out.
Our favorite couple to do double dates with.
They really looked forward to it. Like I would be like, can you watch my daughter? And they'd be like, no, we're seeing Aubrey and Matt tonight. We can't. And I was like,
sorry.
That's fine, but that's wild. So, and then fortunately, I got invited into the conversation a little bit, which was always lovely.
Yeah.
And you guys are amazing and I adore you, like independently of my parents, but It was such a funny way. So like clearly you have, based on Hazel and what that does. And I find it interesting, like the ability to make friends of different generations. Not everybody does that, can do that, or sort of separates that from like their persona, I guess, or how they connect with people. Oftentimes people don't connect as well with other people in a different generation, or certainly that stretch, because that's what, like 40 to 50 years.
Yeah, it's true. It's something that, I mean, since I was a little kid, I think it helps being a firstborn, my dad's only daughter, and it's being around adults, I think probably lended itself well. But I was never afraid to talk to people that were older than me. Even when we would visit my stepdad's grandmother, she was in a nursing home. We would go visit her when I was under 10 years old. And I would bring my sister or she was with us. And while they were with my Nana, I would just go walk the hallways with my sister and just say hello to everyone and just start conversations with people in the hallway. Like that, I just have a fear. Like, I don't know if some kids are like kind of scared in those scenarios. Yeah. I just would go and be social. And so that was kind of, maybe the start of it. But I have always sought out friendships with people that are not in my age group. And some of the coolest people I know, like your parents, are much older than me, and they have the best stories and they've lived life. And I think those relationships and friendships are just so rich. And I have plenty of friends my own age as well. I will say that.
I assumed. I mean, yeah.
I do just appreciate those friendships so much because they're just so rich and the things that we would talk about are so different. So I always appreciate just different ages.
That's amazing. It's amazing. Also, people don't really see through the age part. Like they don't see through the visual. And I find that a little bit interesting because you are clearly a very visual person. I mean, you're a chief design officer, like you've been in design and in aesthetic for what seems like your whole life. So it's funny. That piece is always sometimes the piece when I've been out with them. And like, as you said, I mean, my parents are still the most interesting people I've ever met. but they look like an older couple at this point. So you go out and people think, oh, it's just an older couple. And I'm like, if you only knew.
That's my favorite way to, when I've shared the friendship about your parents, my favorite is just to put in a little tidbits about them. And there's a stereotype. It's all about the stereotype of who you assume. I think older people especially, and you can group that kind of age or description as you want, but I feel like people are stereotyped so much when it is truly a stereotype. There's so much more to learn in depth. They're people with they've lived great lives. So I love uncovering the layers of the onion.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And interesting with Hazel, which we're going to talk about in a minute. I'm really psyched to talk about it. The other piece about it that I think is kind of interesting is that you're serving a community that is perhaps not the age of my parents, but nonetheless, it is a community that needs the poise pads. I mean, ultimately, like that's what's conjured. That's what I know of when we talk about, what would we call it? Like feminine hot? No, how would I phrase that?
In terms of the category?
Yes.
Yeah, so the category could be like, we position ourselves as femcare, but the category that we live in is incontinence or adult care.
Okay. Adult care and incontinence. So that's what is kind of amazing is that, and makes so much sense for you too. And I'm going to have you talk about it and like tell everybody a little bit more about it in a minute. But the thing that I find is wild is that you've actually figured out and understood from clearly a genuinely like deep perspective that older people, there's a journey between like my age, early 50s to 88, and all of the needs that happen as you get older. I mean, we were just talking about my readers. I'm always looking for nice readers, those products, but I don't necessarily either know they exist, know I need them, or frankly, want to walk down the aisle.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I do a jumping jack and I pee on myself.
Yep.
Unless I've literally gone to the bathroom moments before.
Yeah.
I had a baby at 46. So like even less so, the Kegels are not doing it for me.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily want to put on a poise pad, but I do need that protection. And that 30-year spread between my age and my parents' age is there's a lot of need that I've witnessed because I know my parents and I know what they kind of need, but it's not something that's readily available that even exists. And it's very disempowering that way on a certain level. So with that, I'm going to go back and let you talk about and tell us about you and a bit of your journey and how you got to Hazel, which is your brand. You were the founder of it and the chief design officer of it, and you have an extraordinary aesthetic in general. I've seen your apartment and all of the things, and this aesthetic really reflects the beauty around that. But I'd love to let you talk about how you became a founder, how you became a designer this way, and then how it became Hazel.
So I've spent my career in New York working at various startups, but all of them were really focused on women in specific life stages. And that's kind of the niche that I discovered I loved so much. And I will say the more taboo, the better. From a design and brand standpoint, it just makes it more challenging and more fun. Anyone can design a beauty brand or even a fashion brand. But what I find so challenging about this space specifically is there's so much emotion tied to it. And because it's taboo, it just takes a different approach. But each company I've worked at, I started out with a company called Cricket Circle. It was a baby registry with an editorial component. I learned so much. I worked as a designer there, covering both like digital and brand and supporting the editorial side. And I learned so much about leaning into those taboos, whether it was about miscarriage or postpartum or infertility. And even this is back in almost 10 years ago, we were talking about pelvic floor therapy and no one knew what that was.
Wow.
And I just remember building that article, that piece with the editorial director, and it just being so new, like we'd never heard of it before. And so it was just such a great experience. There's so much I've taken into building Hazel from that experience. And then I was at a company called Rockets of Awesome.
I love that company.
Face.
Oh my God. I walked into, I think it was a Bloomingdale's, I think it was before I had my daughter. And I was like, this is the most amazing brand I've ever seen in my entire life. It was so beautiful. And the array of everything in this, like it was a little pop-up area in Bloomingdale's. And I was like, this is making me want to have a baby even more than I wanted to. And it was a lot of it.
I love that. I love to hear those stories. It was such an incredible opportunity to be a part of building that brand. The founder of Cricket Circle started Rockets of Awesome. So I actually went from Cricket Circle to start building Rockets of Awesome with her and got to be a part of that founding team, doing everything from we named the brand, we built out all of the brand identity. I like to say, as just a designer in kind of your typical startup environment, I was doing everything you could see, touch, or feel, and supporting just about every single team, from like building decks for pitching the company to investors, to pushing code on the tech team, to doing art direction and like the visuals, and then even designing graphics on the kids' t-shirts, because we had a fashion design team in-house. So I would support them. I was designing like hang tags for the clothing, like just like anything you can imagine. It was an incredible experience. I just got to do so many different things, just applying my design skill set in every which way. And I was even doing like user research and developing their digital products, so the website, and then we had this kind of like data side to it. I learned so much, and I met incredible people through that experience that I brought into Hazel as well. It was an incredible experience. And then the kind of next part of that journey was I really wanted to lean more into product design, digital product design, and user research. That was something I was really passionate about whenever I was building a brand or a product. I always wanted to take that user first approach. So back in school, I studied in Copenhagen, and the kind of Scandinavian way of designing is often human first, is what it's kind of called for the approach. So instead of saying what's going to be the cheapest and make us the most money, it's what's designed in the best way so that it's comfortable and aerodynamic or whatever. Just so it's comfortable and it makes sense for the person using it. And I just took that with me. And so I ended up going to a company called Zola. They're a wedding company, tech company. And I was hired as their first product designer. And they, at the time, just had a wedding registry. And the co-founder, Nobu Nakaguchi, he was a designer. And so he really became a mentor for me. And I got to work with him for a good year before we built out the team, where we launched just about all the wedding planning tools that they have today. And we were always taking that user first approach. And so that was just really special. I think with designing all the different products that we did, it was always talking to that end consumer, whether it was the bride or oftentimes, especially toward the end of my time there, I was bringing in women over 50 specifically. They were a revenue driver for registry. Think about your grandmothers, your family friends, your aunts. They're usually the ones buying the gifts for the couple.
I was just on that's true.
Yep, that's the stereotype, at least. So I was working with that audience quite a bit too. So it was kind of, it covered like pregnancy, baby, and then moms with young kids. At Rockets was our primary customer. And then it was primarily brides, and then call it their moms or family friends. And so all of those seeds really had been planted. They really fed into things that I loved when I was a kid too. Like I loved, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and just like pregnancy and baby and all that stuff was like just things that I loved. And then weddings, like I was the kid that had my whole wedding planned in a binder at like 12.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's really
I was like
funny.
buying bridal magazines at a young age.
But was it for the husband or was it for the aesthetic of the wedding itself?
Oh, it was definitely for the aesthetic of the wedding.
That is a different thing, my friend. That is not the same thing. I was like, I know you and your husband have been together for like a really long time, but I was like, I feel like this is an aesthetic question. Yeah.
Oh, it was definitely like what colors, what flowers, what's my dress going to look like? Yeah. No, it definitely was, I would say more than that. I think it was kind of inferred that, of course, there's going to be
of course, you'll love and treasure and all that. But, just like, let's make sure the dress is good.
Yeah. So there are definitely clear themes throughout my life. It was through those experiences and kind of all those seeds that were planted when I got connected with my co-founder, and he comes from the finance and strategy side of things. He had been working on this concept. He saw that there was a white space in the personal care category, and specifically for women over 50 was kind of the segment that he looked at. Mm-hmm. And when we got together, we got introduced actually through my husband. They were in a finance networking group. Yep. And made the intro. And I was like, well, let's talk to women. Let's hear from them and just start with user research and just learn what's needed in this category. And it was through conversations initially with just women in my life, and then expanded from there. I talked to everyone I could just get in front of or get on the phone with. And it was through those conversations that I learned that there, for a lot of women, I would say it was like half that were in the category and half that were avoiding it, but that they had, so for women that were in the category, they had this kind of basket of products that they were hiding behind the cleaning supplies and like the back of the cabinet. And there was just so much shame and stigma associated with these products. And that included the incontinence category. So often like fully absorbent, either adult diapers or pads. Yeah. And there was just so much shame and stigma. The brands didn't resonate. The products were terrible. Mm. And so just continued on that journey of like, what does she actually want? It was a great pair of underwear, happened to be disposable and super absorbent, but something she could wear under her leggings. She hated how pads stick to the side of her leg when she was doing jumping jacks or working out.
Or it didn't work, by the way.
Or it didn't work.
Or it didn't work. Yeah.
Yep. So it was through that we ended up, I brought in a fashion design team that I had worked with. They were consulting. So I brought them in. I'd worked with them at Rockets and brought them in. And then we married their kind of design experience with a material scientist. And we actually developed our own materials and patent pending absorbent technology that allowed liquid to distribute evenly, allows it to be super thin so you don't get that bulky diaper look. And then we designed it to look and feel like real underwear. So that's an oversimplified.
I'm sure it's highly oversimplified. That took quite a while to get there, but nonetheless, yeah.
It took 2 years of product development, and we did that even through the pandemic, which was another journey in itself. Yeah. And then we officially launched Hazel as a brand in 2022. We just launched online with that. We had some amazing press. I think this was the opportunity I was excited about to really just change the conversation around this experience and break the stigmas associated with the category. So one of our first pieces was in Vogue, and the headline was like, it had the word incontinence in it. And for me, that was just like, we often use the word leaks when it comes to the experience, but that word incontinence, it's not a word that often resonates, as you can imagine. Yeah. And so we got Vogue talking about it, and we got a feature on the brand in Vogue, which will probably always be the highlight of my career.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all.
That was amazing. Yeah. And then, we were covered in InStyle, Glamour, Oprah. It was a great opportunity to just change the conversation, get people talking about an experience so many women have. We found that 1 in 2 women experience leaks, but a majority,
50%.
50% of women experience leaks, and it's because of pregnancy, childbirth, menopause. And through those experiences, a lot of women, especially it's gaining traction, but like I mentioned with pelvic therapy, a lot of women don't have access to it postpartum.
Right.
Or as they're going through kind of perimenopause through menopause. And so leaks are something that are super common. Laughing, coughing, sneezing, working out, it happens. So
interesting. I went to Denver, your hometown, to visit my best friend a few weeks ago. And my daughter and I'd never been on a trampoline in a trampoline park. And I was excited. Like, none of the women were participating. None of the moms, rather, were participating, and the kids were jumping on the yeah. And I was like, screw this. I want to play. Like, this looked really fun. And I was like, oh, wait. Oh my God. I don't know if I can do this. And I literally took my kid to the bathroom, and she was like, you just went to the bathroom. I'm like, I know, just wait, hang on. And went to the bathroom and then came back out and was able to jump for a little while until I had one sip of water, which I needed because we were jumping around. And I was like, because I didn't quite understand why all the moms were not jumping. And part of it was like, yeah, they're not jumping because they live here and they go here all the time and they don't necessarily want to jump. But the other part is that it's amazing exercise. It feels really good on your body. You get to participate with your kid in a way that you don't really. So there were so many upsides to it. And then when I had to go to the bathroom, all of a sudden I was like, oh, that's why they're not doing it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then we went again, a few days later, and I used a pad and I was in like running shorts and I leaked almost immediately.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And I leaked and through the pad, like I was like, oh, well, this is embarrassing.
It's a common story I hear, both the pads and the trampoline. So much so with the trampoline that we did during our brand photo shoot, we did a whole shoot just of one of the models on a trampoline for content. I have the mini trampoline under my couch right now.
But that's hilarious.
for future shoots. But
Nice.
it's a story that I hear from investors, from friends, from customers. It's a conversation I've had so many times, and it's always like, I just want to jump on a trampoline with my kids again. Like it's such a specific experience that so many women related to. Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, this is part of the taboo around these kinds of topics. I find this like often, and as I get more vintaged and I live life more, I find this when I got divorced. It was like I felt so much shame around getting divorced. Statistically, it was like half the planet gets divorced or something like that. But
but no one wants to be a part of the statistic.
No, exactly. And you feel like you failed. Even if you wanted it, you feel like you failed. But what was interesting was I had a lot of people on the side come to me that were like, I was divorced. My kids don't know. Or I wish I was divorced. There were like a lot of these conversations that nobody's talking about that really it's like healthy to do so, because it's like, if you are going through, and then it happened when I was on fertility with the baby, trying to have my baby for so many years, it was like, I didn't want to talk about it because first of all, I was afraid I would get fired if they knew that I was trying to have a baby or that I was going to be a single mom. And then also just like the fertility struggles are real. And then I would have conversations with people and they're like, oh, I did IVF. And I'm like, oh, how many tries did it take? And they were like, 1. And I was like, I feel for you and I get it. And that's a big deal, but it's so not the reality of what nobody talks about, which is it took me 6 and a lot more other things to get there. So like, it's so funny. All of these pieces are so taboo and so disempowering for women specifically.
I had the same experience with miscarriage. It was like, no one talks about it. And when you're going through it, it's the same thing. You don't necessarily want people to know that you're trying to get pregnant. So then when you have a miscarriage, who do you tell? Because you want to protect that kind of process and your mental health. But at the same time, you need that support.
100%.
But then I found when I did talk to a select group of women, I found that more women had experienced miscarriages that I had no idea. And then all of a sudden you don't feel alone. And it's something that absolutely should not be taboo. It's all these experiences we, as a society, we make them taboo and we make women feel alone and like they've done something wrong or there's something wrong with them. And it's something I'm passionate about changing for sure.
I love that. Me too. I had a big miscarriage and then a small miscarriage, and the big miscarriage was big and very traumatizing. And had I not been so far along in my fertility process that I did have enough people that knew what was going on because I just needed them to, because also like after 4 years, like I was going not the hormones and stuff. Also, I needed like some support. But had I not had that, it would have been a totally different experience. Like, so yeah, no, I'm really big on like opening Pandora's box and letting it all come out. That's so cool. That's really cool. So I just want to go back to the Hazel part because, well, first of all, I love the name.
Thank you.
Because it does feel like Hazel was a show from like, I don't know, I think the 50s, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And it's kind of a lot of these names, they're coming back. And the box is so pretty and so modern looking. And then the name, like, and this is, you designed this, yes?
I worked with a great team. I will not take all the credit. I worked with a team to design it, but oversaw the design.
This has your aesthetic written all over it, by the way. Like, I'm not saying it takes a village no matter what you do, especially to launch something like this, but this has your aesthetic all over it. So yeah. But it's so pretty. It's so modern. It evokes an emotion because you're like, oh, that makes me feel good. That makes me feel pretty. That makes me feel modern. And it serves my purpose. So, and then the name is Hazel. My generation, I certainly knew Hazel as that TV show, but I don't know your generation. Obviously you do because you're attuned to that generation, but it's very cool. It's very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, I think, developing the brand overall, it was kind of table stakes. It was like once we figured out that obviously the product wasn't resonating that was available today, so we knew the product needed to be better. But when it came to the brand, I looked at what was out there. The legacy brands just didn't resonate with the consumer. They made her feel old. They were brands that her mother, her grandmother wore. And what I found when I was talking to these women, it was like they just wanted to talk about their beauty and skincare brands and like the fashion brands that they loved. And they just continued to tell me everything they loved about them, all the different products that they loved. They had them on the shelf on the wall for everyone to see. There was no shame, no stigma. And so how I took those conversations was, well, why do we have to look at the personal care market even as what this brand should live in? Why can't we be inspired by beauty and wellness and skincare and fashion and build a brand that's just completely different? And being in retail, so this packaging specifically, we launched into retail this year, and that was a learning experience because you have to design and convey information in retail on your packaging that, she can look at it in a few seconds, determine what it is and if it's for her. There is some information you definitely have to have. You can't be discreet about all of it. I worked with a team that was super experienced in the category, but I could put it through the lens of beauty and skincare and fashion. And so even things that like the models that we used for each package, they represent, like they're actually wearing the brief that's in the pack. So size small, size medium, size large, size extra large. So
That's
they are
awesome.
wearing that size. And so it allows us to have a more inclusive brand. We also didn't Photoshop our models. So you can see her, you can see stretch marks, you can see scars, you can see rolls.
Yeah.
And that was something that was really important to me. I'll never forget, we were at a museum maybe in Europe. And I remember seeing this sculpture of just like a European, probably Renaissance era. And I'm like, that's what my stomach looks like.
Oh,
and I don't think I'd ever seen, because that was the day and age where it was, if you had a little extra on you, then that was healthy. And that meant you were even like wealthy.
You were wealthy because you could eat. Yes, you can overeat. Yes.
That's something I've taken with me. And I think when building Hazel, it's like we need to show real women. We need to show women that will really resonate with this consumer. And she shouldn't have to buy a size that doesn't look like her. Like, let's, reflect her back. And so that's something we did with it. So there's kind of the basics that you need on packaging, but we were really intentional and thoughtful with the details like that. It was really fun. I think something that we'd heard constantly that women that walk this aisle, that they have to buy products on this aisle. It takes you back to like when you're 12 with like pads or tampons and you're like hiding them in your sleeve. Like women will put them in their cart and pile everything else on top of them just to hide the fact that they're buying them. Yeah. So my goal was like, let's design something she can just like put under her arm and walk through the store.
Oh, that's awesome. And you certainly did. That's amazing though. I love that was the intention.
It was, yeah.
That's very cool. That's really it's such an important piece. I guess it's part of what your mission is to remove the taboo, from what did you say? The more taboo, the better, and then remove it. So smart. Yeah. Such a smart way of doing it. Well done. For sure. For sure. Yeah, of course. So tell me the founder route, like what made you, it's a very big thing to decide, I want to found something and I'm going to commit to this because I know it's a big road. I worked at a hedge fund, but basically came over with the technology. It was a spinoff of another company, but literally it was not a startup because there was big business capital, but everybody was taking it as a startup. And I was working easily 70 to 80 hours a week for at least almost 2 years probably. And it was thrilling, but it was also a ton of work. So committing to that, I knew the company I was at on some level was going to succeed at least. Hedge funds are a little iffy anyway, but on the level of hedge funds, I was with a winning team and I knew that. Yeah. I'm sure you knew and had confidence that you were with a winning team, but nonetheless, being the person who is founding it, who is leading the fray or leading it, regardless of whether you're doing it with somebody else or independently, is a very big thing to do. Talk to me a little bit about the process of how you got there, made the decision, and then what it took.
I would kind of go back to even being in college. Something that I wasn't exposed to a lot of women in leadership growing up. It just wasn't something that I lived in a small town in Georgia for 9 years growing up, kind of elementary through high school. And I didn't have a lot of women in my life that had big careers or were considered leaders. And it was something in school that I started listening to podcasts like in the very early days of podcasts. And I remember there was this one that started interviewing women founders. And it was like my junior year. And I remember listening to one in particular that she was talking about, she had one company and then she launched another company. She says the day her daughter was born. Not sure if that was exactly possible.
Bless her if that's the truth.
I know. And I heard that and she said, because I wanted to show my daughter she could do anything. And that spoke to me so much because it was like, I can do anything. And there was an instance in a class project where I think this was like either my junior or senior year. And we had to choose someone to lead the project. And the entire group chose me. And I just thought that was so funny. I'm like, wow. I just love to make friends and plan parties. Those are like my two favorite things. And I didn't realize that those actually translated really well to getting everyone excited about a project and then managing it. And those are like actually really great hard skills and soft skills. And so it was those two kind of instances that stayed with me as I uncovered the whole kind of startup space tech scene. And then ultimately moving to New York after going to school in Denver. Living in New York was something I'd always wanted to do since I was a kid. I grew up coming here. I always said, I want to be a fashion designer and I want to move to New York. Kind of the cliche, I feel like little girl dream if you don't grow up here. Yeah.
Yep. It's a cliche for a reason.
Yeah. And so we had the opportunity to move here and we did that. And the first job that I got was I cold emailed this woman that I had followed. She was a designer. And I found her really randomly and I just followed her career for a couple years in school. And when I moved to New York, I sent her an email and I said, hey, I'd love to take you out for coffee and just hear your story. And she responded.
Wow.
My best advice is just send the email. The worst they can say is no or not answer.
Yep. Amen, sister.
Yeah. That it was true because I moved here. I didn't know anyone. I didn't know anyone. I knew one person, but we weren't like close friends or anything. And that was the only person I knew. And so I went to coffee with this woman and she asked to see my portfolio. And I was like, I'm not trying to ask for anything new to the scene. And she asked to see it. I sent it to her. She sent it to her entire network. And that's how I got the first job that I got.
Wow.
I had other interviews in other companies, but the one I remember the interview that she had gotten me or made the introduction for was the one that I wanted the most. It was Cricket Circle and it changed everything. And so I would say being in the startup environment, I'd already kind of been seeing myself more as a leader, really enjoying watching and being immersed in the startup space. But it was really, I think around that college time that I started to think like I could start my own company and I didn't know what that would be. Mm-hmm. But what I found working at Rockets of Awesome and just doing so much, that's when the hours were crazy and we were building something from nothing. And it was truly like just a crazy experience from all sides. I learned a lot about work-life balance. I learned a lot about myself that I love to just constantly be working on something. If something needed to be done, if I didn't do it, no one else was going to do it because our team was so small and everyone had to like just attack what they could. And I thrived in that environment. And when I went to Zola, it felt like a more mature company. I was hired as that team of one, but then the team grew from me to 12. And then the company went from 65 to 200 during my time there. Wow. It was a lot of growth. And what I found was I wasn't interested in just kind of going up the ladder. Yeah. I loved doing and learning and growing and being challenged every day. Yeah. And so it was kind of all of those things that I knew that I needed to start my own thing. And that's where I would really thrive. And it was just figuring out what that was. And then things kind of unfolded from there through my network. But I will say that I use every single skill set I have every day. I'm challenged every day. I learn something new every day. And that's where I know I'm meant to be in this role.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I get the experience of really wanting to throw yourself into something and touch it all. I have the same kind of feeling. I feel when something's happening, I really want to grow that way. And I don't love being siloed. I do think that's kind of female too. I'm not saying men don't have it, but like that, yeah.
I knew I was ready to take the leap when I knew I didn't have all the answers, but I knew if I had a question, I had someone in my network. I had built up a community and a network that I could call someone to give me the answer.
How did you build it up a little bit?
I was a part of some like membership groups. I would cold email people often. I just was always asking for introductions. And I mean, I was networking. I will say like I'm the weird one that just like enjoys that. Going to different events and panels and just anything around the city I could get to. Mm-hmm. And always seeking people out. That cold email taught me so much. So I really did do that a lot. If there were brands that I admired, I'd reach out to the founders. I also did a lot of freelance as a designer, so that helped as well. I only worked by referral, but I was often building pitch decks for early stage founders, female founders specifically. That was like this niche that I found in just freelance that a lot of designers hate building decks, but I didn't mind it. And it was a great way for me to see different perspectives and different ways of building a business plan and telling your story. And so I used my design skill set and ability to story tell and helped these founders raise like their first round of funding, and then supported with any like smaller design needs that they needed. So I did that on the side, which helped grow that founder network too.
I like to network as well, actually. I've always liked it. I enjoy listening to other people's story. I enjoy kind of the human connection of it. Actually, the moving to the networking on the internet, which I like on social media, I enjoy that as well, but I really enjoy the human to human live networking. Yeah, it was like a little bit of a reconfiguration. But give me one tip that you would say. I love the cold call, but like that would maybe talk to or speak to those who don't really like to network, even if you're an introverted extrovert.
Yeah, that's how I would describe myself.
Me too. Yeah. Like as an introverted extrovert, like what is a tip that you could give for the ones that lean more or skew more on the introverted side than the extroverted side?
Everything doesn't have to be in person. I mean, through the pandemic, when we couldn't meet people in person, my go-to was wine and Zooms and just asking people, hey, would you hop at like a version of a coffee date? And like it could be a coffee and Zoom. But I'd say too, I think you do have to put yourself out there to meet people. I think that's straightforward. But one thing that I enjoy doing when I'm meeting new people is not just approaching it with like, what can they do for me? But I think the power of building a network is being able to connect people. And so if it's a good fit, I believe in the person and all of that, like I will offer to connect them with someone else in my network. If there's something that they're, trying to do or learn more about or what have you. And then to making the introduction and just asking, how can I help? How can I support you? Because I think that I might not have something that I need at that point right then from them, but being able to extend just support in what they're doing, I think it also doesn't hurt if you do need something later. Something I've had to learn too is like just getting over the kind of stereotypical female thing of like, it's okay to ask for things like and ask for help. And so it's something that I've learned my way of doing it is, well, how can I help you? And then I have this thing going on. Would you mind helping with this? Right. Those are a few tidbits.
Thank you. No, that's helpful. And it's very natural too. Like you connect with somebody, whether that's a friend or a coworker or a colleague or somebody that you just met. And you sort of do, most people, like you want to get involved. You want to help them. It's not just a one-sided conversation ever. Like no conversation that's actually a conversation is one-sided. It's always both people come with an intention and they're taking action on the things that they're coming from a world. And then they come together and they want to maybe do some business or have a good conversation or whatever the thing is. But no, that's great tip.
I just approach networking as like, it's making friends, it's building relationships, it's telling your story. So I don't know, I try to take the edge off. It can be transactional without being forced. Sometimes that's okay too, though. It's a mix. But I think that at least makes me feel more comfortable.
I get it. Yeah. No, I mean, that's something I learned in Los Angeles because when in New York, I grew up in New York and one would be like, oh, well, you grew up in New York. So you must have had like the understanding of how to network and the sophistication and the like I'm going to network. I had none of it. I was terrified. If I was trying to network, if I was trying to meet somebody and it was specific, I felt very sneaky. It felt sneaky to me if I had an agenda. And there's nothing wrong with an agenda. Everybody has an agenda. Like, even if I just have to go to the bathroom, there's an agenda. I got to like go to the bathroom. And it wasn't until I moved to Los Angeles where everybody's networking with everybody. And it can get a little obnoxious, but it occurred to me like, I can help other people as much as they can help me. And I always do. I've done that since the beginning. So why can't I go ask for help also? It was a very revelatory piece in my personal professional life as well. I want to ask you a little bit. Clearly, you are a natural leader. Like, clearly you evoke a response to people who trust you and see that you will take them someplace they want to go. When you mentioned it a little bit about like you can get people excited about a thing and then you can show them how to do it. Tell me a little bit more about how you approach leadership now that is maybe a little more conscious than just, I like to plan parties and make things pretty.
To actually apply that skill set.
Yeah.
Something that came to mind as you were asking that is just mentorship. So I have so many people in my life that got me to where I am. And so being a part of various programs, I've mentored lots of younger girls and showing them like all the different skill sets and things you can do in the startup space or tech, or even as a founder. Like, there's not one size fits all. I definitely don't fit the stereotype. I love a puff sleeve dress and I'm like very girly, and
I always love it's all black, but it's always super feminine. It's beautiful. I've never seen you even pregnant, even like 2 days after you had your son. Like, I was like, she looks amazing.
You're so kind. I just love, I think it goes back to breaking the stereotype. I love kind of turning on its head what I should be and just doing what I like.
Yeah.
But in terms of leadership, so I will say, yeah, that's like, I guess I had some leaders in my life as well that didn't fit the stereotype, that were very much themselves, whether that was how they dressed or it was how they led. And I had some founders I worked with, I almost would put them in more of like the introverted category, and they were quiet leaders. They weren't going to be the loudest voice in the room. They were great listeners. And they showed me that you don't have to be the most aggressive one in the room to get people behind you. And so I apply that with one-on-one conversations, checking in with people. Is this working for you? Always being open for feedback, asking, how can I do this better? Is this just constantly iterating the way that I do things to just make sure it's kind of working for everyone, hopefully not to my disadvantage, but it's more about relationships for me. So it's, how would you build a relationship? I don't know. I approach leadership in a very similar way. That's how I move things forward.
Interesting. And so this is a little bit of a maybe taboo, maybe not, but with that in mind, have you gotten feedback that's bad? Like, have you gotten feedback that was like, ooh, crap, I need to really revisit this? And then how did you handle that? Because I think that often is the thing that people get scared of when they ask for feedback or they take feedback in, that some of it is true. Some of it you don't want to hear. Some of it you do want to hear, but it's part of the job.
I wouldn't even say it's bad feedback. To me, it's like, it's constructive. And oftentimes it's something I knew, but I needed someone to tell me out loud that I should approach it a different way. So, I mean, I will say I've definitely gotten a lot of constructive feedback throughout my career.
I mean, haven't we all? But yes.
Yeah. So I will, yeah, definitely have. And it's something that, I mean, I would rather know what's not working than what's working personally. I'll keep doing the same things if it's working, but I'd rather make a shift. And I think that really speaks to being in startups. Things change so quickly. And then I also was practicing user experience design, and with product design and user research, you're often designing a digital flow or digital program, and you're putting it in front of a consumer to see if it resonates, if it works, if it's, you think this should be this color, or say a phrase should be said this word, or a flow should go to this page next. But then when you put it in front of the consumer, it doesn't make sense, or it's confusing to them. And that's something that you're constantly humbled and checked for, that you're not the smartest one in the room. And I think that 100% has like just come with me into leadership. It's like, I may know a lot about a bunch of different things, but I love to bring in experts, and I love to bring in people that are so much better at things than me. Like when it comes to the packaging, like, yes, I could do that, but I know this other group has way more experience in this specific area. I'd like to bring their expertise and then offer what I know I am good at to kind of blend both. So
that takes a brave person too. That takes a brave person. It's not easy to say. I find this with hiring. I've done a lot of hiring in my career, like probably about 200 people I've interviewed and that kind of thing. And one of the things that I had to shift to do, I learned it from my mentor, by the way, was that exact lesson, that you're better off hiring someone who knows more than you, or maybe has more potential than you, because they are going to bring things. And the once or twice where maybe it can blow up in your face and it can get ugly, because business can get ugly. That's fine. That's got to be okay, because the end result is that those people are making it better. Lincoln said that, actually. It was like, I believe it was Lincoln said, never be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to take like a little bit of a turn, because you became a mom a year ago. So you had the 1-year-old birthday of your son.
Yes.
Tell me how that kind of shifted all of this, because you clearly have the like, I bring my whole self all the time into your career. How do you do that? And then how are you doing that? And then I know how much you love and adore your child and how excited you were. And clearly, once after somebody has a miscarriage, especially, like they realize the preciousness of it just that much more. I'm not talking about the work-life balance, just because I don't believe that's a thing. There's no balance in work and life. But what did you have to adjust? What did you do when you had this beautiful baby boy that showed up in your life after you spent your lifetime, thus your adulthood, throwing yourself into your career?
I definitely had some great examples in my life of founders that were also moms. And so I had those examples of what life could look like. That was really helpful, because I wasn't always sure this is what I wanted to do in terms of both. And so that was really helpful. I talked to, in kind of typical user research, nerd fashion. I talked to a lot of moms, and I was like, how do you do this? How do you, what are things I should consider? And I will say it takes a village. I have so much support around me. My partner is hugely supportive. We have an amazing nanny, and I couldn't do it without that support, just logistically, mentally, and emotionally. I'm so privileged that as a founder, I had flexibility in those early days, that I could take a maternity leave, because that is a wild ride. And I didn't have postpartum depression, thank goodness, but like it still was really hard physically. I think the day we bumped into each other, I was barely able to sit on the stoop. I think that was one of my first times outside, and I just wanted to be outside so much, but it was so uncomfortable. It's hard. It was having that time to take. It was so privileged to have. And then I have a baby that is pretty chill, as you've gotten to know him. He's pretty chill.
He is a chill kid. Yeah.
I don't think there's here's how it works. You kind of just make it work. It's something that's added to your life, and you respond as needed. I don't think I have all the answers. It takes a lot of effort in terms of, call it balancing or what. It's more just like what needs to get done. What are the highest priority items? Making sure that I can prioritize both my time, and then having that time with him, in the evenings, and just making sure I'm prioritizing that. And we have our routine that, we read a book as a family together, and then he goes to bed, doing all of that. Like having those routines, I think is nice, but also, taking him to the wine bar up the street and doing that on a Friday night too is so important.
I love that.
It's just, I don't know what the answer is, but it's just kind of like day to day, and not putting too much pressure on myself. And I do put a lot of pressure on myself, but I try not to. I have really high expectations, and I definitely can have those days where I'm just like, I'm so overwhelmed. How am I going to get all this done? And, and then the next day it's like, okay, check off a few more items and feel better.
You made it.
Yeah, it's definitely not. I think you definitely have to, in making the choice to do it, you have to be kind of open-minded. It's something that has served me so well. And then just kind of rolling with the punches, rolling with whatever's kind of happening that day. Because if you kind of have too rigid of expectations or ways things should get done, I think you'll just be stressed out and overstretched. I try to be as chill as he is.
Are you as chill as he is?
Probably not, but I try. I am very like, I don't know. I'm type A, but I mean, it was through how I like went through my whole pregnancy and even the delivery and postpartum was just like, be open-minded. Everyone's experience looks different and just kind of respond as new things come up. And it's really, I mean, it's how I probably just approach my business too.
It's funny. As you were talking, I was like, she really is like the walk, talk the talk. Like you really are like, clearly, I mean, I know you, but also as I'm talking, I'm learning more about you than I ever did too. That you really clearly bring your whole self into your work and your whole self into your personal life, and they are the same whole self.
Yeah.
And that's not everybody knows how to or is able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, putting away my phone, being present, that's a practice that comes to mind. And then I'm trying to like be better at like posting on social media for the sake of, but it's like,
sure, yeah.
That's a hard thing to break. But I think even just doing that, just being present as much as you can in the moments that you're in helps too. I don't know.
That's great. No, I mean, I understand there's no answer. And it's like,
yeah.
Tell me how you do it. And it's like, I don't know. I'm doing it.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for people to hear. And for myself to hear, like, I mean, nobody does it perfectly. It's impossible. There's no such thing, but you can do it and it's going to look different for everybody. And you can't really know externally. You can't really tell from the outside what's happening on people's insides and what's happening. I mean, we've talked about this just in terms of postpartum. I didn't have postpartum depression, but I was absolutely the person that probably should have or would have. And all of my friends were on watch. Like my therapist was on watch. My friends were on watch because I had gone through so much fertility also that my emotions were really up and down. And I really,
all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. That I was like, very like, everybody was like, okay, she's had the baby. She okay? And I was like, I'm okay. I don't know. And it was literally, I was so giddy for the first 3 weeks. My best friend came over after about 3 weeks and sat down with me. And I was like, I'm exhausted and I'm done. And she's like, I'm so happy this is happening because you have been unhealthfully happy.
You kind of came down.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I guess that's true. It was like, I mean, maybe that was like a survival technique also, but it was just like, it's so funny. Like, that's why I wanted to know like how you do it, because it's like, hearing the pieces, I think everybody has to do it differently. Nobody knows how somebody else does it and nobody knows how they do it.
Yeah. I think it just sometimes, not to say it happens to you, but you just kind of, every situation's different. I mean, some babies sleep, some babies don't. Some babies are picky, some babies aren't. Like there's so many, some are like a schedule, some don't. And you just have to respond. And I don't even know if any way is easy. It's all hard, but just, it's all relative. And
yeah.
I don't know. I love that description though of postpartum. It reminds me of I think it was day 4, right? But the day before the day my milk came in, and that's like when you have that huge like spike or up or down with her. And I was crying because I loved the education side of it, like getting all kind of learning as much as I could before, and I was crying to Matt, like sobbing. This is the next phase. I knew intellectually that like this is why I was feeling this way, but
yes,
I remember that so much. It's like,
oh God,
when it's kind of just happening to you sometimes.
That's really funny. I get it. That's so funny. I actually had like I had a weird with an ex, like not, I'm a single mom. So, and I had like an ex-boyfriend and there was like a little bit of drama that had happened about 9 weeks into my pregnancy. And I was so hysterical over this. Now it was real. Like it was definitely drama, but my response to it at that point was so beyond hysterical.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't really like to describe women or myself as hysterical, but I was hysterical. And finally, thank God for Google, because I went in and I was like, at what point do you feel what? And I was like, the 9-week point apparently is one of your highest emotional states in your pregnancy. And I was like, it didn't make me feel better, but at least it was information to make me feel sane.
Yeah, I think that helps. So, I mean, there's so many things, like there's no TMI here, but it's like, okay, that day when I've had a headache for the whole entire day, it's like, oh, on my period. There's always that one day. Or, I'll be like, oh, just so like I don't want to use the word depressed, but just very down.
Yeah.
And it will always be like, especially with your cycle and everything, you just kind of have those like things, but it's always like validating when you realize, okay, it's because of that.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, it's like, we have to go through this. Like, this is something that women have to go through, is that our body is literally changing within like monthly, weekly.
Yes.
And we need to like respond or know when that comfort. I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about things being taboo and conversations being taboo. I'm in perimenopause and it was embarrassing to say it. I mean, now I'm like shouting it through the rooftops. And fortunately, you have now advocates on social media that are talking about it that don't look like the conjured image of the
woman going through menopause. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
She's exhausted. She looks quote unquote old. She's all of the things.
That the only symptom is hot flashes. Like that was the stereotype forever. That's one of 30 something.
Yes.
So
yes, exactly. And one was your knees get itchy. Like there's so many crazy symptoms.
Yes. Yep.
Like your knees get itchy that I had at some point. I was like, my knees are itchy. But knowing that's for perimenopause is very good. So
yeah,
it's really like destigmatizing the stigmas as best as possible.
And making you feel like you're not crazy, you're not alone.
Yep.
This is normal. Not to say there isn't a solution or you can't get help for a certain thing, but just knowing that you're not the only one experiencing anything is always nice.
Right. And actually then it goes back to what you've done with Hazel, which is kind of incredible, is that you've found something that's happening and you're giving people a solution to that thing, which is pretty amazing. It's really special. I appreciate it. I have this with regularity. So tell me where people can find you.
Yeah. So we are online at hellohazel.com and we launched into retail this year. So that was our kind of big undertaking. We are in Meyer, which is in the Midwest.
Okay.
And we are also in Wegmans, which is closer to here. So
love Wegmans.
Yeah. And then we also just launched into Rayleigh's and we'll be there in Northern California. So coast to coast now and in the Midwest. And we will continue launching and expanding next year. We have several other retailers lined up. We know she likes to shop in store. That's an important part of her routine. So that's where we want to meet her where she is. But yeah, you can find us on hellohazel.com. We're on Instagram, hellohazel_.
Amazing. And where can people find you if they're searching and want to follow you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram. I am on TikTok, although I don't post. On Instagram, I am at Aubrey Rachel, and it's AEL.
AEL. Amen. Got it. Yes. Like Michael, AEL.
Exactly.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time and talking, and I've loved talking with you. I mean, I adore you anyway, but I really loved getting to know you even more.
This was so much fun. You're part of my village, and I love just getting to know each other more. Any excuse is fun.
Absolutely. Me too.
Thanks
and
for having me.
Back at you on the village part. Hey, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, please hit subscribe. You can also find me at carolpodell.com, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Carol Podell. You can watch this at She Takes the Lead podcast on YouTube. If you'd like to keep in touch, go to my website. I've got a few things I'd love to send you. In the meantime,